Hello, and welcome to episode 3 of Find Things Well, a podcast celebrating the series Our Flag Means Death in all its magnificent fuckery. I'm Elayna.
And I'm Abigail. And today we are going to be discussing Our Flag Means Death, episode 3, The Gentleman Pirate.
So today, kicking off things with What's on Deck, which is the part of the show where we share our latest news about the series, as well as open the floor to any messages, questions, shout outs from listeners. HBO still hasn't renewed it as of the time of this recording. So I hope that by the next time we get to this segment, we'll be able to say that that's not the case, but they're leaving us hanging.
We record every 2 weeks, so they've had a lot of time.
Yeah. It's taking a dangerous amount of time at this point, and I'm starting to get a little bit nervous.
The Winchester's got a whole ass trailer and release schedule, and Our Flag Means Death is still sitting there waiting. And we know which one of those shows is going to be better, I say, as a longtime Supernatural fan.
Yeah, hard agree there. And Heartstopper got renewed for 2 more seasons. Did you see that today?
Yeah, I did see that today, which is also super exciting.
Yeah.
Queer media gets good engagement. HBO.
Yeah, I don't, especially, you know what, I think though, this is my personal theory, that's maybe wrong. I think they're waiting to capitalize on Pride Month to announce it.
Oh, that would be smart.
Like, I think that's what they're waiting for.
So like 11 more days and they can announce it.
So we'll see if that turns out to be true or not.
This week, we wanted to give shout outs to a few listeners who sent us messages. One of them was Spencer from Tumblr, who sent just like the nicest note about enjoying the discussion from the episode. And they mentioned that they love the Leslie Knope comparison. So thanks for being another Leslie Knope stan in the chat.
Yeah, we love that.
Yeah. We're glad that made sense to someone other than us.
We're glad that we weren't the only ones that noticed Stede's big teacher energy.
Yeah. just you wait. I have another comparison this week of what energy Stede has this week. We'll get there.
I can't wait.
I think that's gonna be my thing, is I'm just gonna have what energy does Stede have? What career does Stede have this week? We also have a feature on Spotify where we post a question each week. So if you listen on that platform, you can respond to that question and we will feature some of those responses on the show. This episode, we wanted to shout out user It's Jonah, who responded to our "Who was your MVP this episode" question from episode 2, telling us that my MVP was Izzy Hands, which outs me as an Izzy stan, but he is legit just doing his job, scouting other ships, taking hostages to sell, etc. Also, he's so dramatic and serious, it's funny to me, and we agree.
Yeah, I love that we're getting some Izzy love, because I have very complicated feelings about Izzy Hands, which we'll get into as we progress through this show. Yeah, especially because you still haven't, as of the time of this recording, you still haven't seen the end of this show, have you?
So when we decided to do this podcast, I decided I would wait to watch the last few until we're actually recording them, which, is not great for my not watching them, because I would like to watch them, but will hopefully mean that the content in those episodes will be me after a fresh, entirely new watch through. I do know spoilers. I knew spoilers before I had seen episode 1, to be perfectly honest. I was like a couple of weeks behind a lot of people on the watch.
Yeah, and I think it's really cool that people are really fascinated by his character. And also Con O'Neill is just the nicest person apparently, and is so engaging with fans. Like, he's out here retweeting not safe for work Izzy fan art, and I have respect for it. Yeah, I'm just I'm like, wow. I'm like, can you imagine Jensen? Never mind. Anyway, that's another conversation for another podcast.
Elayna, that's on our other podcast.
Yes, but let's just say I can't imagine certain people from a certain monster hunting show ever tweeting not safe for work STL art.
I mean, to be fair, one half of that acting duo does tweet about fanfic, so
yeah, he does, and how he likes it on top. But again, for more on that, listen to Saving People Quick.
The other show where we talk about gay shit every week. Oh yeah, no, I was just gonna say that Izzy, that actor's voice, his voice is so nice.
Yes,
his voice is so nice to listen to, even when he's saying terrible, scary things. His voice is so nice to listen to.
And I love how every other word out of his mouth is fucking, not fucking, it's fucking, spelled with 2 O's.
Yep.
And he just keeps that up, and I'm just like, good for you, Izzy, good for you.
That segues us into our Things of Note segment, where we will dive into our main discussion of episode 3. For starters, we're going to take a look at the description of the episode from HBO Max, and we will rate that description on a 5-star scale.
For this week, Stede, aka the gentleman pirate, conducts business in the Republic of Pirates. Oluwande and Jim face their past. On a scale of 1 to 5, how do we rate this week?
I'm only going to give it a 3, mainly because I don't think Oluwande and Jim actually face their past. I think they mostly avoid it. When I went to rewatch this episode, I forget like what events happened in which episode. So I like read the description as I pulled the episode up. And I read the description and I was like, I don't remember what the fuck happens in this episode. And I didn't remember until I got several minutes in. So I like think that it's not the greatest description because it does not call to mind any specific details about the episode. So I'm gonna give it a 3. It's not terrible. It's not
That's
like
very
it's
fair.
not as bad as episode 1. Like episode 1's description was bad.
That was abysmal.
This one is, it's
well, this is the first time on this show that I'm rating something higher than you did. I gave this one a 4, only because I feel like it is just, it's not a great description, but it does tell you, it's just very basic. Like
That's
it's
fair.
like it, and also it like, I don't know if this, I feel like other people would be like, this is going to make it lose a point. But for me, the fact that it has the title in the description, like, I'm like, oh, okay. So we're very clearly talking about this. For some reason in my brain, that made me go, yeah, this is
that's fair.
slightly better.
That's fair. It is the one interesting detail in this description is like,
yeah, because they have like a AKA, like it takes you out of it for a second.
I like that. It's kind of fun.
Yeah. And I also just love that it's called the Republic of Pirates. Like I would have loved to be in the writing room the day they decided what to call that place. Like, okay, we need a really scary island and it's, going to be like a place where there's a bunch of really scary pirates. How about the Republic of Pirates?
Republic of Pirates. Like,
it's just,
it's like yeah. It's
just such a goofy
it's a
name.
Place name.
Yeah.
It's a place name.
4 stars for being on the nose. But yeah, who is your MVP for this week? Your most valuable pirate from this episode?
I mean, I'll explain more why later, but I'm going to say Stede this episode.
Nice.
I think, he goes to conduct his business and he conducts his business and some things go sideways. But not really for any fault of his own. Highlights some of his competencies in this episode. And I will talk about those later, but that's why he's going to be my MVP. He keeps his cool, keeps his head.
Yeah.
Almost loses his nose, but he keeps his head.
Yeah, I was going to say, almost loses his nose, gets stabbed in other parts, but his head is all together in this episode.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not counting the last few minutes of the last couple, like 30 seconds of the episode is not going well for him, but
But it's going well for us because we get to see Taika Waititi, which we'll get to.
Oh, yeah.
That's a whole separate part of the conversation.
I have notes.
Yeah. My pick for this week was Lucius. Because he's so over it the entire episode, and yet like he does things that are like really effective. Like he manages to get Jim's knife back, and I think that was a really nice moment for me to see because like Jim was ready to literally like kill him at the beginning of this episode and like fling him into the ocean, and then the fact that he managed such a good, like, I'm going to make this up to you, that he like actually got this family knife back to them, I thought was so great.
I fucking love Lucius in this episode. So very much.
Yeah.
I go back and forth on my favorite character in this show, and Lucius is in the top 3 for sure. With that, very fun MVP pick for the week. We're going to move into our like episode discussion in general.
Where do we begin? There's so much good shit in this episode. I found myself as I took notes, all of my notes were just the one-liners that I loved.
That's
because there were
too.
so many of them this episode. Like I need these writers to calm the fuck down because they're so good.
It's such a clever show. Like I love how clever it is. It just it pops and everyone gets a chance to pop. Everyone gets a chance to give a like zingy one-liner.
Yeah,
it's great. Can I do my bit for this week?
Yes, please.
So my bit for this week is about how Stede is a marketing major. Like, I'm not talking like a marketing graduate. Like I'm talking he's a marketing major. Like he thinks he knows shit.
Oh my
and sometimes
goodness.
He's right. Sometimes he's very, very wrong. He literally says, like in the beginning of the episode, he's like, polite menace, that'll be my brand. Every pirate needs one. He's
so funny about his branding in this episode.
Yeah. Once I noticed it. I couldn't unnotice it.
I'm so upset that I didn't know that was a note of yours prior to watching it, because I feel like it would have colored the whole experience for the better, and I'm probably going to rewatch it again after this. It's just because that's so accurate. And especially when he's like, draw us in front, sketch us in front of this really weird looking thing.
Yep. He's trying to get good, content for the socials.
So this entire episode was really a PR campaign for the Gentleman Pirate.
He says also really early on, he's like, everyone does that. I don't even remember what he's talking about. I just wrote down, he's like, everyone does that. He wants to stand out.
Yeah, he wants to kill people with kindness.
Exactly. He's like, I have a brand and I'm going to execute it. And that's what's going to make me unique in this pirate market.
Yeah. And he allows himself to be very easily persuaded by anybody that notices that, because the whole thing where what's his name, Geraldo convinces him to come aboard the Spanish ship with the tapas, which is just a great fucking throwaway. And actually that's a side note that I have to make, that I think Roach has some of the best, just pops in with something absolutely obscenely hilarious and then just goes right back into the background. He's so good with those. And he's one of
the smallest characters in terms of amount of time on screen.
Yeah, he always he doesn't have a ton to do each episode, but the second he's talking just completely wraps you in. And the actor too is also
so funny. He's
such a gem.
Funny.
He has so much cool behind the scenes stuff that he posts on social media that just makes my heart happy as a film nerd. But yeah, so I was making a point about him, but before that I was talking about Stede and Geraldo and going on the ship. And the reason I was mentioning that is because when he comes up and he's approaching Stede about this possible opportunity for fencing the hostage, he's like, yeah, he deals with real refined types like yourself. So it's this, Stede, I think, agrees to go with him because he's like, oh yes, well, he recognizes how awesome I am.
He recognizes my brand.
Yeah.
It's where Stede is a marketing major, not a graduate. He's easily taken in by this very same strategies that he's trying to play on other people. He's a kid playing at this, and sometimes he's right and sometimes he's not. He says, I may be new to pirating, but I know a thing or two about good salesmanship, which I think is an adorable line.
And then he says
what happens afterwards. yes, exactly. I'm like, this is the person who has a marketing campaign but did not crowdsource what a 12-year-old boy would think when they hear it.
No, because I'm just going to be honest. I need you to say this line because I might make it my text notification noise because I feel like it's going to be hilarious. It is the funniest line. And the fact that you put it in the doc, I'm going to need you to say it.
It's the line of check out this fabulous booty I'm hawking. It's so good. It's so good.
Stede, what were you thinking? Man for sale.
He said it with such flair. Okay.
And then someone buy my booty? Sir, you're a grown man. How do you not understand that what you're saying is absurd?
I mean, because he's not thinking that way.
Nope.
It's very sweet that he's not thinking that way, but it's very funny. And
yeah.
It contributes to my theory. I'm just going to assign Stede an occupation every episode. It's just that versatile of a character.
I truly love that for us, honestly. I also love that you were noting what a mood Lucius is and how completely over it he is with everything. If it's scary, going back to the ship. There's the part
Lucius deeply in this episode.
Well, the one moment that I really love from him is when Stede is picking up the noses and he's just he's like, you gonna help me with this? And he's just like, no, absolutely not gonna do that.
Lucius knows, he knows his line. He's like, no, I didn't want to be here. I wanted to go back to the ship. This is not my cup of tea. This is not my scene. So you knocked over a jar of fucking noses. I am not picking that shit up. This is your problem, Stede. This is not my problem.
And that moment also gives us what I think is one of the most iconically ridiculous lines. I mean, that's saying something. There's a lot of ridiculous lines in the show, but my noses gets me every time.
Also, can we talk about how what's her name? The actress is
Leslie Jones.
Leslie Jones, thank you. Can we talk about how Leslie Jones is so phenomenal in this role? She's so funny. Every line out of her mouth is funny. Her whole way of moving is funny. Like it's just.
I love the third person too, when she's like, Jackie is a person also. Like it's just like, why are you talking like that?
I don't know. And like in some characters, I would find that super annoying, but in her, I find it
perfect.
Really funny. She pulls off lines with such confidence that it works.
Yeah, like she really just like sits there with her wooden hand, like smoking a joint, and is just unbelievably funny. And I also wanted to make the case for both Spanish Jackie and Lucius this episode. I feel like they have both established themselves as noted bisexuals because yes. Jackie's sitting here and she's flirting with Jim and like being completely obscene with the language that she's using. But at that point, she knows about Jim.
She knows who Jim is.
Yeah, she knows who Jim is. So that means that she's flirting with, quote unquote, Bonifacia, because
that's who she knows. That's who she knows Jim to be.
Exactly. And so I was just like, oh, okay. Like we get mention of your 20 husbands, but we don't know how many wives Spanish Jackie has. And that's something I'd like to find out.
I feel like it's not wives, it's girlfriends. It's, that's the vibes that I would get from Spanish Jack. Like that's the vibes.
Yeah. And also I would be willing to bet cash money that at least some of those husbands are probably trans men. But that's just a closely held headcanon.
And honestly, in this show it works.
And also Lucius, because of the whole, is it weird that I'm suddenly into Jim now?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so yes, I want to talk about Lucius because every reaction he has is correct and hilarious. And that line particularly, his like, I refuse to believe that Lucius does not know exactly what he's doing in that moment. He is messing with Oluwande. Like that's all he's doing. He's going like, he is looking at him. He's going, I suddenly have some leverage. I can make your life a little bit miserable. And I was stuck in a trunk for a while. So like, and you knew, and you weren't stuck in a trunk. So like, I am going to mess with you a little bit in good nature, but also I'm like, oh, am I suddenly into Jim now? Like, it's probably true, but it's also like very targeted at Oluwande.
Yeah. And just the way he just slams the door in his face. It's just like, I'm not going to entertain this.
Also, it's hilarious watching Olu's face on that, like Olu's reaction to that whole scene. He's such a pleasant character.
Oh yeah.
He's such a pleasant character. He's such a like warm, sort of gentler character. In the like he exudes this kind of warm energy.
He really does.
And that moment he's ice cold.
I also love that we noted that it was kind of gauche line because
only Olu could say that kind of line. And like I know that he knows what it means. Anyone else on that crew would not know what it means, would use that line incorrectly. Olu knows what it means. He's using it correctly, and it's ridiculous that he is.
And then Spanish Jackie's reaction, it was fucking kind of gauche. Like I love everything about this is I'm just fascinated at how solid all of the writing in these episodes is. Like every single line out of these characters' mouths manages to either land with an emotional punch or land with a hilarious punch. And that is what I think makes it like a perfect rom-com, because when it's funny, it's hilarious. And when it's emotional, it is devastating. And I love that kind of dynamic in a show.
It manages to do both, like be heartfelt and be funny. A really nice balance. I think we've talked about that in the last couple of episodes as well, but it continues to hold true here. I think this in general is a more like an episode that leans more into the funny nature,
definitely.
But I like thoroughly enjoy it. Another line that is just really funny is that like absolutely Titanic balls to come in here. Like,
I saw someone point this out on Twitter. His character is very obsessed with balls. Because he also mentions to Stede that he has probably the biggest balls of anybody he's ever met.
Yeah, like
and then
60% of the lines he has include that.
Which just Fred Armisen, like I don't know who decided to put him and Jackie, like, you know, the two like SNL people, like shove them into, you know, the Republic of Pirates, but it was a brilliant casting move.
It was a good casting move. I would, if you had pitched me that character in that scene with Fred Armisen, I would have been like, are you sure? But he does it beautifully.
Yeah. And then the reveal on what is in the glasses, like the note that it's nose juice from the nose jar.
Oh my gosh, I like both love and hate that because I have a visceral reaction to like watching people drink or eat gross things, and I think it's just because like I have so many sensory things around food that as soon as like someone in a show eats or drinks a gross thing without knowing it's a gross thing, I'm always like, ugh, ugh.
Yep.
But it's very funny. I mostly like sympathize with Lucius because Stede is just like, is trying to keep his cool. He's trying to be like, he's trying to be tactful. Lucius is just like, why am I here? I did not want to leave the ship. I wanted to be on the ship right now. And now I'm drinking nose juice.
While covered in somebody's blood and wine.
It's not a good day. It's not a good day for Lucius, honestly.
Yeah, he's not having a good time in any capacity.
He gets a kiss out of it at the end. That's the only good thing that happens.
Yeah, he gets to kiss Jim.
Jim gets to kiss him. It's really what happens.
Yeah.
Also, we have to talk about the line. We don't have to talk about it. I just need to say it out loud.
We have to.
He's got terrible taste. Is it flunkies?
Yep, that's what he says. Okay,
cool. He's got terrible taste in flunkies and he can go suck eggs in hell.
What is Steve? What did you think that?
What does it mean?
I remember having the same exact reaction when I heard that line. I was like, I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself. But what the fuck are you talking about? Like, what does that mean?
It's again, like he is a small child that is like, I'm going to put words together and I'm going to make it sound mean, but it mostly sounds nonsensical.
Yeah. And then the fact that one thing I did want to talk about was also Izzy in that moment, because Izzy really shows like his conniving nature in this episode, because he lies to Blackbeard. Like he tells him that he told him that Blackbeard was his boss, but he never did.
No.
And like, that's like, we wouldn't know that if it weren't for the Geraldo character being like, yo, like Izzy Hands was in here saying that his boss wants to talk to Stede, and they're like, Blackbeard wants to talk to this guy, but he didn't tell that to Stede.
No.
And it's just, so you get to see this really interesting glimpse into just how kind of conniving of a character Izzy is going to be. He's smart. He's very, very smart about this. Because he puts just enough truth into what he tells Blackbeard. Yeah. That it's viable. Yeah, that it's viable. And he says he can go suck eggs in hell line. And with that line, he makes Stede not seem very smart. He like makes Stede seem either reckless. Well, he makes Stede seem either reckless or not very smart. Yeah. And he makes him seem like he doesn't care about Blackbeard with the lie, but it's so close to the truth that it is actually just, Izzy is very, very smart. Well, and what makes it interesting to me, I think one of the fascinating things about, now that we've got to the third episode and we can look at these, the introduction of this show in 3 parts, I think that the build to all the things that Blackbeard learns about Stede makes Stede sound so much more impressive than he is. Mm-hmm. And so it gives you this very interesting, like, he's got a false sense of who Stede is. And at the same time, when Stede meets him, like Stede at the end of the episode doesn't realize he's talking to Blackbeard, but he has very preconceived notions about Blackbeard. And so that is why I cannot wait for next week or next episode, because we're going to get to talk about the way that the two of them interact with each other and see that, like, neither of them were right in any preconceived notions they had about Blackbeard and the gentleman pirate, because that's really who they think they know. Blackbeard thinks he knows the gentleman pirate. Stede thinks he knows Blackbeard. But next episode, Stede and Ed are going to get to meet. Yes, they're going to get to meet as humans. Oh, excited about that. Yeah. I think that is another thing that like highlights a thing this show is doing really well, in both it being funny and it being heartfelt, because the fact that they have these mistaken impressions is funny. Like, it's played for laughs, but it's also like thematically one of the things this show I think is doing is showing us like characters that like aren't what they appear to be. Exactly.
And they are what they are on the outermost layer. Like they're characters that have a lot of depth and heart to them, characters that have more vulnerability to them than they're presenting in their persona.
Exactly.
Stede is presenting this persona of like a gentleman and refined and more in some ways a softer kind of, he's trying to be this soft sort of pirate but he also has this tougher interior
that we've seen glimpses of so far.
This like resilience and this like ability to make really hard choices and this like I'm gonna push through sort of attitude, this like that we see in this episode and we see in other places as well. And then on the flip side, like Blackbeard is like Ed is a tough exterior that's got a lot more softness going on in his actual way of relating to the world. And I think that like the show is a good exploration of like personas and how much that like impacts when we like meet someone at first if we think we know them.
Exactly.
And like they get to explore that, and I'm so excited to talk about it in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, well, and you made such a beautiful point in our very first episode. One of the first things we talked about, you brought up how the episode, like the whole show starts with things did not go as planned. And I feel like we're going to talk about that like literally every episode because it is consistent. It's a thesis statement for the characterizations in the show, the plots in the show. You're constantly getting this like subversion of, you think it's going to go one way and it goes this way. And these characters think they know these people, but they don't really. And so you get this like really deep, nuanced show that is just based around this idea of things not going as planned. And I love that that's something we talked about early on and that we're going to get to keep talking about it because it's each episode as we get into these discussions, I'm realizing like, wow, that really is like the entirety of what the show is about in a way.
Yeah. Things don't go as planned. People aren't what they seem. The end of the story isn't what it seems. The place we're going and the place we've come from, neither of those are as simple as at first look. And I think that's why the show is fun to even get to, rewatch and like watch more than once.
Yeah.
You get to see more of those themes as a whole stretching through the whole show.
Yeah, because I've now at this point rewatched the whole show itself probably like, I'm gonna embarrass myself here. I think I've seen the whole thing all the way through probably like 5 times.
It's not that long of a show. You don't have to be.
You don't have to like commit a ton to it. But what's funny is when I was watching it downstairs, my one roommate actually mentioned, like, because he saw that I was like going to put it on and saw that it was like 24 minutes. He's like, I thought this was like a 40-minute show. And I was like, yeah, because it packs in that much into a short amount of time.
I will say like another show that is, there's 20-minute shows often don't do very much. And I like love 20-minute shows. I love like 20-minute shows. But another show that I think also makes really effective use where I watch it and I'm like, isn't this 40 minutes is Star Trek Lower Decks. It's like an animated adult Star Trek show. And it's similar, like in terms of, it's not similar at all.
Yeah.
Everyone should watch it. I love it. But it mainly what you made me think of was just like the pacing. Like it's also one of those shows that's very fast and packs a punch into every scene. Like nothing is wasted. They're doing a lot. They have a large group of characters that they are effectively using, all of their characters, and they have very on the nose, like quick dialogue. And I think that's part of what makes both of the shows like really enjoyable to watch and to rewatch, because every time you watch, different lines are going to like specifically land, and you're going to notice, and you're going to get enjoyment and like humor out of them because there's just so many and they're so dense.
Well, yeah, that was one of the lines that you had in the document that you wanted to talk about, was the Roach's whole line of like, like, did you know that, she was a woman? And he's like, how would I know that? That was a line that like, I never really noticed it before, but this episode, when I watched it, for some reason, I just could not stop cracking up about it.
It's like, that whole exchange is very funny and I really like it.
It's played so well that like everybody literally thinks he's ripping Jim's nose off. And it's
also such a long shot, like painfully long, where I'm like, this is too long. This shot can end. But it stretches out that like moment of like the whole crew reacting. It makes them react for longer and longer. And
Yeah.
it, like, is very funny. And I also just appreciate in terms of like the gender piece of it, it doesn't feel gross.
Yeah.
You know, like I think there's a potential with a reveal of character not being what everyone thought they were, whatever that means.
Yeah.
There's a potential, and in a lot of shows that ends up reading and being reacted to, you know, really frankly quite transphobic sort of way, or sexist, or both. And in this, like, there's a gross come on to Jim, and I'm like is the one piece that,
yeah,
you know, is gross. But it's also very clearly gross. But the reaction of the crew,
yeah,
is free of that sort of like cringy, really disgusting, transphobic sort of feeling.
I agree with you. I think it's because they put so much emphasis on the like hilarity of the reveal and making that like such a slow thing. And I think for me, what really makes that little scene and that moment complete is the beard coming off.
Yes.
Because everybody just like stops mid the beard coming off because they're like, oh God, he's ripping off his beard. Wait a minute.
Yeah, the nose doesn't clue them in. They really would just be like, oh, he just has a fake nose on top of his regular nose. That's weird. Like, they're not a smart crew. They wouldn't have figured that out.
No.
And I think it's because they also like have given Jim as a character the kind of like relationships with the rest of the crew where Jim is mysterious. They don't ever, nobody ever knows a lot about Jim. So like the fact that Jim isn't what they all thought they were gives it like they are not reacting in the really gross way that
exactly
could. And I think it's just a testament to how they've set up the character interactions in the
because everybody is all like, the nice thing about Jim is that they're a character that everyone around them is impressed by. For one reason or another, and
or scared by, intimidated by.
Exactly, but like being scared, you're impressed in a terrified way. Like you're just, it's like, you know, not to make a reference to another pirate thing, but it's kind of like, you know, you're the worst pirate I've ever seen, but you have heard of me. Like everybody is scared of Jim, but with good reason, because Jim could fucking kill you with their pinky.
Well, I mean, like, Lucius learned very, very recently that you don't fuck with Jim.
And also his whole moment, it was another instance of a line that in another show would have otherwise, I think, come off as like fat phobic, but it just totally didn't in this, when he's like, we were exercising to make our bodies smaller. It's just
so obviously a bad cover for whatever they were actually doing, which makes it sound like they were all like sleeping together. Like that's what it makes it sound like. It makes it sound like they just don't want to admit they were having sex. Like
exactly. It comes off, it's like, I just don't know how they managed to do that with this show. Like take things that could have in another context been like rude or offensive or falling flat, and just, it was hilarious.
But I think it's because they're setting up they're setting up this context for this crew in a way that's celebratory and not afraid. I think that's part of it. And I think it's also just like, because it's such a queer friendly show, and I think that extends beyond just being queer friendly. It's friendly to, we talked about Black Pete, and like we talked about him, we've talked about like a number of different characters and the things that make them unique, and how the show either just how the show never makes that the butt of the joke. And so I think that's why even some lines that in a different context could come across really the wrong way, in here just comes off as like Lucius is panicking
and doesn't know what to say, and
that he doesn't feel fat phobic, and neither does anybody else in
the room. Everybody in the room is kind of just like, really.
And like I can sit like, if, and I don't say this to discount, like if anyone watching the show did feel from that line, like point. That is also a legitimate feeling, because that line can be taken that way. And I think it's like important to say that, just because like I don't think the intent is there, and I think that like the way it's executed is generally has a different vibe. Like I think obviously everyone interacts with media in their own experiences and their own context, and like, you know, something that's
a very good point to make.
Might not affect me, might affect someone else. But I do think it carries a bit of a different thing.
Well, because it's the nice thing about this show, and anybody that talks about Our Flag Means Death and only talks about it in the context of it being positive for queer representation, I think it is missing the point of the show, because it was not made just to be like, hey, look, these characters are queer. It's also, hey, look, there are people of color in the show, there are people with disabilities in this show. Like freaking Blackbeard has a knee brace, and it's nobody ever mentions it. Like dude's got a mobility aid, like just casually. And that kind of shit is just, it shows you that the showrunners really were trying to present this show in a way that it felt inclusive to everybody. And you know, I think that they did that really, really well in terms of,
it's not trying to be representation, it's trying to be like an accurate depiction and inclusion, like which is a different thing. Like it's not just being like, we're trying to tell a queer story, we're trying to tell a story about, like, those characters are not primarily queer characters or disabled characters or characters that are racial minorities. Like they're like, none of these things are what these characters are identified as.
They're not defined by these things about them.
It's Oluwande, it's Ed. Like that's who they are as characters, and the show believes that. And so I think because the show believes that, and the way they're written and characterizes that, it's a disservice to be like, this is just a show about minority representation, because like, no, this is just a show that like is about these people. And these people have all the diversity of like people in the real world. And let's like not make, we don't need to, we can be excited about the rep without like allowing it to be what it is, and allowing them, ultimately at the end of the day, they're people.
And that's the thing that makes it so enjoyable to watch. And it's a show that you're able to just watch and not have to like feel, I know this is gonna sound weird, but it's a show you can watch and you don't have to feel stressed about it. Like I feel safe in this show, because I know that it's not going to sit here and try to make a joke out of any of the things that I happen to be as a person. You know, it's just going to be this fun, heartfelt story about these characters. And I think that that's really where its strength is.
I'm not waiting for the other shoe to drop. Like I'm not picking out a piece of representation and being like, oh great, they have a queer character. Oh wait, never mind. They just did a crappy thing to them, or they just said a crappy thing about them, or they just, you know, like put them in a situation where their queerness was the only thing about them. You know, like any of these things that are just like, I just expect them in other shows. Like I expect tropes, and I expect certain microaggressions, and I think seeing that this show is a lot more free of them. It's not perfect, but it's a lot more free of them generally does feel a lot safer as a viewer, which is like very, very, very nice.
It's a wonderderful thing about the show.
I want to say my one like critique of this episode.
Oh, okay, please.
I mean, maybe not my one critique, but like the one thing where I was like, I don't love that humor. The hanging that's played for laughs.
I actually would very agree with you there.
I don't think it needed to be in there to affect, like, I think you could have led up to that scene. I don't think the bucket needed to get kicked out and he needed to struggle. Like I just found it unnecessary and uncomfortable. And because it was being entirely played as a joke of him like scrambling to try and breathe. And I was like, let's not joke about that. Let's not joke about this kind of thing.
That's actually
also, there's a white criticism. Character. Like there is, I think, like, I do not think we should be doing that. I do not think it was necessary. I think they could have had someone knock him out. Accomplishes the same thing, doesn't have to resort to making that a joke. And I just
like maybe, somebody cuts the rope and he immediately falls and like hits his head or something.
Exactly. Accomplishes the same thing, but doesn't, like, we don't need it in that scene. I think and other people may feel differently, but I just, like, it was just the one thing where I was like,
that's like actually, I didn't have that in my notes, but I do agree with you. Like that part it's one of the biggest moments in the show that I'm just like super uncomfortable watching, because I'm like, oh, like this is like, I know it's supposed to be a goofy moment, but it's kind of not.
I mean, I guess the other like much smaller instance that I also feel a little bit like that is with, and I feel like this in general with shows, I'm like, I don't like when needless like pain and violence is like the butt of the joke. And so they also have that with the prisoner, where he's just been left in the sun and he's like I find the jokes that they make about him in the previous couple of episodes where they're like, you know, can we stab him? Like, I think those are kind of funny, and like with the comedy, the actual like fact that they like left him in the sun to like,
I think the word they use is baking.
yeah, and I like some of it is funny and some of it rubs me a little bit the wrong way, and maybe this is a personal preference, but like I'm really turned off by characters who like needlessly put other characters in pain, and like shows that are like, because like for all the fact that this show humanizes most of his characters, it incredibly dehumanizes the two prisoners that they take. And like part of that I'm okay with, because like colonialism and like these are
that's
not
clearly
like,
the commentary they're trying to make with
and so from that perspective, no problems with it. Like, and I'm even hesitant to say what I'm saying, because obviously like I'm a white person, I do not have any, if that's being done as a critique in very specific ways like that, that is actually a really good point that you're making. I don't want to rescind what I've said, but I like want to be nuanced about that, I think. And recognize like where I just don't have a right to say. I will say just like I'm uncomfortable with
unnecessary cruelty.
Unnecessary cruelty. That's maybe the place. When the narrative is just doing it to be, when unnecessary cruelty is framed as humor, I think specifically. It's when it's framed as humor. That's where I don't find it funny. And that's the two moments in this episode that I don't find funny.
I think those are a fair criticism. And I think that it's also, and it's important, we talk about this a lot on our Supernatural show, but it's important to remember that the things that we enjoy do not have to be perfect. And we are, just because we are criticizing things does not mean that we don't see the merits of that thing. It just means that we actually care. It just means we really care. Well, and we want them to be able to do as much right as they can.
And I think it's like valuable to recognize that shows are made by humans.
No piece of media ever has been perfect.
It's not possible, and it will never be possible. Does that mean that we don't continually try and get better with what we make and do the least amount of harm with what we make? Like, I think that's the principle that applies, is like, can the thing you make do as little harm as possible?
It's very Starfleet of you.
That's fair.
That's a really great take. I that's what I think I enjoy so much. I mean, not that this is a Star Trek podcast or anything, but that's
just you wait. That's like when I have enough time, I will make a Star Trek podcast. That's my next one on my list. It's bad.
Our last thing that we have to talk about before we wrap up main discussion is the fact that we finally get to see Ed's face. He has arrived. Blackbeard is here, and I need him to chill with the leather. That's all I'm going to
say. Big gender mood.
Immense gender mood.
It's a really good, I think they do such a good job in the first 3 episodes of that reveal, of like teasing that. Like, they really take their time with the way they do the shots. Like, every shot consecutively where Blackbeard appears, they give you a little more. Like, the first time it's just smoke, the second time there's a bit of an outline, the next time there's a bit of detail, the next time there's full detail but his back is turned. Like, they do such a good job of like slowly revealing, which it kind of plays into like what we were talking about earlier about like perception versus reality, and like what they're playing with.
And I saw a thread today that was, or not a thread, it was like a text post or something, but it was talking about how in terms of framing, he's really has the introduction of a romantic hero, because it's like he swoops in, he's got the outfit, he's got this like gentle hand thing that he does.
He like stands over the like unconscious character as they like come to.
And he's got this like halo,
the
of
music,
hazy light, the music. For Our Prayer by the Beach Boys. That's the name of the song that comes on. Okay, like, because I
did not know that was what it was called, and I saw you in your notes, and I was like, I don't know what you're referring to. That's amazing.
Our Prayer is the name of that song.
It's a good choice. It works.
It fits a little too well. But I just think it's so funny because in all of the chaos that's going on, Stede, ever the marketing person, is just like, you've heard of me? Like, Stede, sweetheart.
Like, I mean, you know, I gotta give it to him. He's committed to his small business, his small pirate business. He's like, you know,
Stede is a
You've
small
heard
business
of me.
owner.
You've heard. He's like, oh, you might be about to kill me, but you've heard of me. This could
It's
be this
beautiful.
win.
Yeah, it's such a great reveal of his character. And it's weird for me because like having seen the whole show, I kind of forget that he's just not in the first 3 episodes, like hardly at all. And because he's got such a presence when he does show up, that like it feels weird when I like think about these first 3 episodes and I'm like, oh, he doesn't really get here until
and the
the
whole
end
show like shifts once he's here. But yet it was so
Totally.
necessary for them to really do the kind of work they do with the characters, particularly Stede, but also with all the other
I
characters
agree.
before he gets there. Like I really, I mean, as
Oh,
much
I
as I
enjoy
would
it.
love,
Yeah.
as much as I would love, like, 60 more minutes of Ed. Also, like, I love that they did it the way they did. I think it's like really
I do too.
effective, and I think it like allows for like us to really be invested in the whole crew before we start pivoting to focus specifically on Ed and Stede's relationship.
Yeah. Well, it's one thing that we were kind of touching on this earlier about pacing that this show does so expertly well, because it's so hard, I think, to have an ensemble show and get the pacing right, because you're just working with so many moving parts. And like for me, even though I really enjoyed the show, I was a big fan of Game of Thrones. It was an awesome show, but I'll be honest with you, I didn't know people's name until like season 3 because there was just too much going on. There were too many people.
Honestly, I haven't watched the show. I've seen like the first like 2 episodes, and part of the reason I was like, I'm not honestly that interested, partly is because I know how
brutal it
is and how badly it ends, and I know I was like, I'm gonna be disappointed, and I don't need to.
I got invested in season 2, so
yeah. Whereas like I didn't watch any of it until the whole show had ended. But yeah, even in the first 2 episodes, I was like, I am like lost as to who these people are, and I am on the internet a lot. I know a lot about them because I'm on the internet, and I still can't keep track. There are way too many storylines going on.
Yeah, it's a lot, but this show manages to really give each of its characters a full arc, I feel.
Even on the first watch through, you can keep track of them. Like I'm only on my second viewing of these first 6 episodes, and then when I get to episode 7, it'll be my first viewing.
Yeah.
And I can
episode 8. I thought you saw 7.
Yeah. Oh no, sorry, you're right. I saw 7.
Yeah.
8. Yeah.
Oh, the fact that you managed to save those last 2 that you may savor them, I'm a little jealous, I'm going to be honest.
It's okay, you'll get to see all the reactions of
I can't wait
of how I feel about them, which will be a lot of feelings.
We tend to have a lot of feelings on the show.
I wonder how many times I said, oh, I love XYZ in this episode.
Yeah. Well, if Iggy Hands on Tumblr can tell us how many shots they did, and that's how we'll know.
Maybe I'll just like speed run.
Yeah, I think that wraps us up for our main discussion today.
So now it's time for us to tie things up, which is the part of the show where we use the noted Tumblr format of same character, different font to relate a character from the episode to ones from other beloved pieces of media. So who have we got this week, Elayna?
I honestly struggled this week. This was a hard week for me to figure out like a character or a trope that I had seen before. So for my thing this week, I'm honestly going to put it to the listeners to let us know if you had a character from this episode or a moment or a plot line that just really made you think of something else, because I don't know, my brain just wasn't functioning properly this week when I watched it.
That is really fair. I also struggled. I do think I have one that is kind of percolated all episode, and I think I've got one.
Okay.
And it might be a little offbeat, so maybe nobody else will see it. Maybe it's a product of my sleep deprived brain this week. I'm very sleep deprived. But I want to talk about Lucius, and I want to look at Lucius, and I want to say Jim from The Office.
Well, that was, we talked about that in the first episode, but it was who was it? We said Olu was.
Did we say Olu was Jim in the first episode?
Yeah.
That's hilarious. Well, I'm gonna posit like Lucius because he sort of has this feel of like narrator outside of the story that's also in the story. He has this sort of like in this episode, this like, I don't really want to be here. Everyone else is doing things, and I am watching them do things, which is very Jim sort of mood. He, He's like, no, it reminds me of shenanigans going on in the office, and Jim is just standing there being, like the Halloween episode where everyone else is dressed up and Jim's like got like the little name tag. He's like done the bare minimum. Like Lucia's standing there being like, I am not picking up those noses. Same vibes.
That's a sentence.
Same vibes. Like, I am not participating in this scenario.
Oh, and also for honorary mention, this isn't a character that is from something else. It's just a character in this episode behaves like someone else. I would like to offer Jim behaving like a cat in the scene where he just knocks the glasses off the table and runs. Jim is my cat in that segment. Just like, I'm going to stare at you, I'm going to swat it, and then I'm going to run.
I'm going to be like, you didn't see anything. I dare you to see it. I dare you to have seen anything. Like, if you saw anything, I'll kill you. Like,
yeah, that's basic
energy. Like, you didn't see anything. Your cat that you're like, I know you know, and you know I know, but like, I'm not gonna let you know that I know because you will scratch my eyes out. Like, I'm scared of you.
Well, cats do have knives in their feet.
Oh, we love Jim in this episode. I love Jim in this episode. I love Jim in every episode. So, there we go. You get like 3 shots out of that sentence alone.
The last 5 minutes. Oh, well, that is all we have for this episode. So thank you all for joining us. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to subscribe to us on your preferred podcasting platform. Leave us a rating or review. And you can also send voicemails or drop us a line through our website, which is findthingswellshow.tumblr.com.
If you want more of our queer pirate discourse in your life, you can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, where we are at Find Things Show. Join us again next time as we discuss episode 4, Discomfort in a Married State. I'm Abigail.
And I'm Elayna. And thanks for sailing along with us while we talk it through as a crew.